Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got another bike to review. This time it's the Cannondale Super X, the cyclocross bike. It's a 2020 GRX model, and I'll not review it as a CX bike, I'll review it actually as a gravel bike. What is it like to live with on gravel? And something I get asked quite a lot, what is the difference between CX versus gravel? So it's a bit of a longer video, it's about 20 minutes, so you might want to grab a brew, sit back and enjoy. I've got two wheel sets for the bike, so I've got the originals that came with it, and I've kept the tubeless wet weather mud tyres on those, and I've also got a carbon wheel set with these semi-slicks on when I'm in road mode like today. I've had the bike about 5 months now. I've ridden it all the way through winter, done about 1,000 miles, and I've ridden on pretty much every terrain. I've done road rides, so nice long road stretches. I've done light gravel, heavier gravel, bridleways, byways, cycleways, and I've thrown it down mountain bike trails and everything. So I've covered all bases really when it comes to terrain, and it's so versatile. It'll handle anything. So on road it feels really nice and responsive. It's a really light frame, so it's only 1 kilo for the frame, about 400 grams for the forks. So on road it feels pretty much like a road bike. The steering's just that little bit slower, and you do feel just that little bit of extra weight with the wider tyres. These are 32 wide, so it's a little bit more draggy. On light dusty gravel and stuff like this, like a bridleway or a byway, it just flies. It handles everything really nicely. Like most cyclocross, well, pretty much all cyclocross and gravel bikes, it's got a different geometry to a road bike. So you've got a slacker head angle and a longer trail, which I've mentioned in one of my other videos. That just slows everything down. So especially when I rode it through the winter in the snow, you could really feel the front end start to wash out, and you have plenty of time to catch it. So it just gives you that confidence when you're riding on loose surfaces and mud, and that's exactly what they're designed for. It's a normal frame, it's got no trick suspension anywhere, but I'll take you into my favourite feature of this bike, which is the rear triangle. In particular, the seat stays. So they're the longest seat stays I think I've ever seen on a bike, and because it's cyclocross and you don't want surfaces for mud to collect on, there's no bridge there. There's no need for it because it's disc brake. They don't need a bridge there, so they've got rid of that. And the way the carbon's laid up on these stays means that they flex slightly. It's hard to see, but there is a slight angle on that, and they do flex really well. Don't get me wrong, you can't feel it when you're climbing, so it's not a really flexible frame. It feels stiff, but when you get it off road, it's just so compliant at the rear end. And you might have heard me mention on one of my other videos about the top stone that I have. When I was riding that with 700C wheels and 43 wide tyres, this was so much more comfortable with 700C 32 width tyres at the same pressures, around 32 psi, and it's all down to these stays and the rear end of this bike. So yeah, that is my favourite feature about it, and why I choose to ride this bike quite a lot, especially if I'm doing a long road stretch, because it feels like a road bike, but then I just want to dip off road for a couple of miles. It just handles it, even with pressures quite high like I've got today. Another thing at the rear of the bike while I'm here is the AI offset. So you can't see it on the camera, but I'll explain what it is. So most rear wheels, if you look straight down at them, you'll see that the spokes on the drive side are dished flat to allow room for the cassette. And Cannondale think that's wrong, so they've designed an AI offset, which means it moves the drive side out 6mm. That effectively means that the spokes are dished the same on both sides, the same tension, and that's supposed to mean better drive. It's supposed to keep your wheel truer, longer. Whether I believe all that, I'm not sure. So there's lots of other advantages they say, but I won't go into them because I'm not really sold on it. What it does mean, the negative of that is that you can't just buy a set of wheels off the shelf and just bolt them on. You have to get them redished, or like I've done with these, you have to get them custom made, which is a bit of a pain. And it's the same with the chain ring. So the spindle is 9mm longer, and you've got to get all the correct washers to make sure that the chain set is fitted correctly. So the chain line moves out a little bit at the front. That's also supposed to give you a better drive and better chain line through a 1x drive train. Like I say, I'm not massively sold on it. I've got 1x group sets and normally traditionally dished wheels on other bikes, and I don't really feel a difference, but it's more of a negative than a positive for me. The GRX group set, it's not bad. I've got this exact group set on the other bike as well, so I've done about 2,000 miles on this exact same group set, GRX 1x, and it's not without its problems. It does the job most of the time, but I've had problems with the brakes on both bikes, and I'm getting brake fade really badly. It's not because I'm dragging brakes, it's because I think it's because on road your Shimano calipers, which this pretty much is exactly the same as a Shimano road caliper, the same pads and everything in them. On road you've got more speed, you've got air cooling the rotor and the pads a little bit more. When you're off-road and you're heavy on the brakes because it's really steep or a really tricky descent, there's just not enough airflow over, and I find that the brakes fade quite badly. The discs start to go black, you can overheat them, so I hope I can find a solution for that. I'm thinking about Hope calipers, either just the 2-piston ones or the RX4s, which are with 4 pistons, but I don't know whether that's just going to have the same problem with just not having that airflow, but I'm going to try other things. So the brakes are not the best. When it comes to the shifts, it's Shimano, so it shifts really nice and crisp, but again, it's not without its problems, because inside the clutch it sometimes seizes up. So put that clutch on, but inside here it sometimes needs this cap removing, a squirt of oil inside, because the rear mech loses its spring, so the chain just gets a bit floppy. So yeah, I've had that issue on both bikes. I've had it twice on this bike when I've not ridden it for 3 or 4 weeks. If it's after a few wet rides, then that usually happens, which is a bit of a pain again. When it comes to the gear ratios, this is where I think Shimano are really lagging behind, because it's 11 speed instead of SRAM's 12 or Campag's 13. So 11 speed, it's already a little bit short of gears, but at the front the minimum you can get is a 40-tooth cog. And if you want to, on road and most light gravel, that's fine, but if you want to hit some really steep stuff, it's not small enough. And at the rear end, whereas on your SRAM you can put a 50-tooth Eagle cassette and rear mech, so it's road at the front and mountain bike at the rear. With GRX, officially 42 is the maximum size cassette you can get. So with a 40-42, you can run out of gears when it gets really mountain bikey, techie, steep. That's enough talking for now. I'm going to head off down this nice sandy bumpy track onto an old railway line that takes you all the way up through this valley right into the moors up there. I've stopped in this cool little quarry and I'll take you through some of the differences between CX and gravel while I'm here. You'll notice the top tube is pretty much horizontal and it's quite a wide boxy section is that, and it's so that you can get the bike on your shoulder. You've got this big area to dismount, put the bike on your shoulder, run until you can remount and start pedaling again. And that's typical in all cyclocross bikes really. The courses are designed to be so brutal that at some point you can't pedal, so they purposely create this area, make it more comfortable to get on your shoulder. Gravel bikes don't have that, obviously. You're more likely to see a sloping top tube, which lends itself to being able to fit a dropper post. Also the standover is quite high when on this bike, so gives you that illusion that you're high off the ground. It makes you feel a little bit more uncomfortable. And also aesthetically, I mean, this is a 54. I usually like to have quite a bit more seat post out than that, so aesthetically I don't think it looks quite as good, but it does its job. It's doing what it's designed for. I also like that you can have these extra long seat stays that marry up to this, and I've already mentioned the benefits of those. So that's one difference between CX and gravel. Another one is the bottom bracket height. So the bottom bracket is pretty much like a road bike on this bike, whereas on a gravel bike it would be slightly lower. So again, that just makes you feel a little bit more comfortable when you're on more techie mountain bike terrain. When it comes to tyre clearance, it's got plenty of it, but this 32 tyre is as wide as I'd fit. CX bikes are designed to have a thinner tyre, so they cut through the mud better, but still plenty of clearance so you don't get mud stopping the wheel from rolling. If you're wanting to head deeper off-road and you wanted something like a 43 wide tyre or 650Bs, then this bike is definitely not for you. If you wanted to just roll a 32, or you do already on your gravel bike, then you could consider cyclocross bikes and take advantage of that lighter weight with a more racy frame. Another thing you'll notice is there are no bag mounts or mudguard mounts on there, and it makes no apologies for that. It's a racer for the mud, so it's got just the bottle cage mounts. But if you wanted to turn your bike into a tourer or an adventure bike, then you need to go down the gravel road, and you usually get mounts on the top tube, bag mounts and mudguard mounts. I'll be honest, I missed the mudguard mounts through winter. I rode it all through winter, but I had to put together a sort of cheap alternative and velcro it on and tie wrap it on. It was really noisy, so that's one of the advantages of the gravel bike. You can just get some nice fitting mudguards on there that are a lot quieter. Check out the diameter of the head tube. It's got an oversized head tube on it, and that's for stiffness, so it feels really stiff when you're out of saddle on the bars. You could be putting maximum wattage in right over the bars. You're not going to get any lateral movement at all. It's super stiff, and it makes the steering feel really sharp. Although it's got a slower steering because that head angle is slacker than a road bike, slows the steering down. I've got I think it's a 110 stem on here, so it feels really predictable off-road, but at the front end sometimes they feel a little bit soggy, but this definitely doesn't. It feels really pin sharp and really racy. I hope that's given you a few insights into the differences between CX and gravel that I wish I'd had before I bought this, because I came from road just thinking, well, I'll buy a road style frame that's got a lot of tyre clearance and it'll be a gravel bike. But obviously now I know a lot different about the horizontal top tube, about the slightly higher bottom bracket, the fact there are no bag mounts or mudguard mounts, and that you're not going to be fitting 650Bs or anything particularly wide on this. So had I known all that, I'd have probably just bought a dedicated gravel bike. But there are occasions when I'd still reach for this bike. Now I've got it, on a day like today for instance, where I might want to head off on some longer road sections. This is going to feel much more like a road bike than the gravel bike, which is really draggy now with those bigger tyres on. But it's still well capable, even in road setup with the dry tyres on, still capable of heading off on some gnarly stuff like this. So it has got its place, but just consider what type of riding you're going to be doing if you want one or the other. I've just seen that my top tube bag's scratching my paintwork. It's velcroed on, but luckily I found one of my daughter's gloves. I don't mind a bit of flower power on my paintwork till I get home. Can't be having scratched paintwork, can we? Actually, talking of paint jobs, I think for a stock paint scheme, I think this is pretty cool. I like what Cannondale have done. Kept it simple, no big logos, and I'm sure I could do better in the studio, but yeah, like I say, it's a stock paint job straight off the shelf. I think this black and silver looks absolutely wicked. I mentioned that I upgraded the wheel set. I did that classic road bike thing, you buy a bike off the shelf, get rid of those training wheels, buy some nice fancy carbon rims, and I did the same with this. But before you make the same mistake, just bear this in mind. So with cheap alley wheels that come with the bike, I wasn't afraid to run the pressures really low, and let's face it, with a 32mm tyre on English gravel trails, which are not usually buttery smooth like this, they're usually byways, bridleways, lots of rocks. If you hit a rock with an alley wheel, you're gonna bend it, you're gonna buckle it. At the worst, you're gonna write that wheel off. It's not gonna cost a lot of money to repair or replace. With carbon, the first time you hit a rock, if it crushes the tyre casing because your pressure's low, then you're gonna finish up fracturing the wheel, writing it off. So I'm really reluctant to run the pressures low on them, which means the ride's harsh again. So it's a bit of a pain really. I only really use these wheels when I'm on stuff like this, which is really nice and smooth. If you wanted to head off road on proper English style bridleways, then carbon wheels are not the way to go on a gravel or a cyclocross bike. If you're going to be racing this bike in true CX style, in mud, yeah, carbon's going to be fine, isn't it? It's going to be nice and light and responsive. You're not going to damage it unless you hit a rock, so through muddy fields and stuff you're going to be absolutely fine. So just bear that in mind before you spend a lot of money on a nice set of rims and realise that you're probably not going to ride them as much as you thought you would. I've just come up a pretty steep climb, and got to mention again, the way they've designed this frame, it's so stiff and the power transfer is absolutely spot on. The front end's really stiff with that oversized head tube, the rear's stiff, there's no bottom bracket movement. It feels like a road bike. Yeah, they've really done a great job of designing this frame. The other thing is the way it puts its power down when you're on loose surfaces, and when it was snowing, it was awesome. You pretty much sat over the rear axle, and it just grips with the right tyres on, those Vittoria wet tyres. It just grips. You can I climbed some ridiculous steep road climbs while it was impassable to pretty much anything else. So yeah, it's a bit of a masterpiece, this frame. You've got to love it. Right, I'm nearly back now. Just going to do this final section. Well, I'm nearly back now, so I'll say bye for now. I hope you've enjoyed watching. It's been a lovely day. I'm going to get back out later, to be honest, if it stays like this. So yeah, stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.